Well, it's 4:30 in the morning and my body won't let me sleep, so why not talk about Pokemon? I've been trying to do a last-minute Wonderlock before April hits and Nintendo shuts down the 3DS connectivity for all the 3DS games, which is a very sad thing to see, but from the Heart Gold and Soul Silver video, I've kind of been Pokemon'd out in terms of doing a journey and whatever. I will probably make a video on like the Wonderlocks and what the 3DS was as the ultimate Pokemon machine and a little bit in the future, but I mainly wanted to talk about Pokemon transferring from generation to generation. While yes, the Pokemon Company has said that Pokémon Bank and the Poké Transporter app on the 3DS will still be active past April, we don't really have a deadline for when the service will actually end. I'm sure that when they do decide to cut the service off, it's just not going to be, hey, by the way, we were posted on Twitter, it's going to be down in like 10 minutes, so have fun. We're probably going to get prior notice, but still, it's shutting down, and that's pretty bad for old Pokemon games. See, there was this one thing that happened between Gen 2 and Gen 3, where you couldn't actually transfer your old Pokemon from the Kanto and Johto games to Gen 3 Hoenn games or whatever. It just wouldn't work. Learning from their mistake and probably the hardware limitations from the Game Boy to Game Boy Advanced, they have made sure that you've been able to transfer your Pokemon up from generation to generation, even across newer systems. DS models that had a Game Boy Advance slot can slide your Gen 3 Pokemon game into it, with a Gen 4 game connected, and transfer them via the PAL Park. From Gen 4 to Gen 5, we are allowed to use DS Download Play in order to move Pokemon across. And then starting with Gen 6 and the 3DS, we were introduced to Pokémon Bank, a place to store all of your Pokemon, and the Poké Transporter app, which was used to transfer Pokemon from Gen 5 to Gen 6, and just Pokémon Bank in general. And the 3DS was great. It was the ultimate Pokemon machine. You can literally play a game from any region, from Kanto to Alola, on the 3DS. The Virtual Console allowed you to buy and then play Gen 1 Kanto and Gen 2 Johto, and because the 3DS is backwards compatible with the regular DS, Gen 4 Sinnoh, Gen 5 Unova are also there. Of course, Gen 6 and Gen 7, Kalos Alola, were built for the 3DS, as well as Gen 6 Hoenn with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Literally, the only generation you're not allowed to actually play on your 3DS is Gen 3, the Game Boy Advanced games. But that doesn't mean that Game Boy Advance Pokemon can't be transferred up into the 3DS. The Pokemon Company even went through all the effort to make transferring Pokemon from Gen 1 and Gen 2 Virtual Console games available through the Poké Transporter app, as well as being able to put them into Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Moon. With a GBA slot DS and any 3DS, you have connected generations 1 through 7 in a beautiful symphony together, where any Pokemon you catch, any Pokemon you want, you can obtain. And the way they did it, while beautiful, is soon gonna become a problem. See, in one of the Pokemon moves of all time, going into Generation 8 and the Switch, the right now modern era of Pokemon, they decided to introduce Pokémon Home, a completely separate service from Pokémon Bank that does pretty much the exact same thing. It allows you to store large amounts of your Pokemon and transfer them between generations. And you are allowed to transfer Pokemon from Pokémon Bank into Pokémon Home and still have them. But with no Pokémon Bank service active, there's no transferring any Pokemon from the 3DS to Pokémon Home. With this decision, all Pokemon generations from 1 to 7 are segmented off from Gens 8 and onwards. Are you really attached to the new Pokemon Pearl team that you played through the game with? Well, too bad. The latest Pokemon game you can get them up to are Pokemon Black and White 2. Did you catch a shiny Regice in Pokemon Ruby or Sapphire? Well, Pokemon Black and White 2 is its final resting place. Are you running out of space in your boxes for your Pokemon transferred up into your Gen 5 games? Well, I hope you're fine going and finding another empty copy to buy off of secondhand markets to just sit and hold your Pokemon. But wait. Didn't I say that the Pokemon from Generations 1 through 7 were the ones separated from Gens 8 and onwards? Why am I saying Pokemon Black and White 2 are the farthest you can get the old Pokemon up to? Well, that's because Black and White 2 to X and Y requires the Poke Transporter, which is a subsection of Pokémon Bank. So yeah, Gens 3, 4, and 5 are separated off into their own segment, because those don't require any type of service besides what the system was built with to operate on. That also means that, once again, Gens 1 and 2 are segmented off by themselves. Gen 1 and Gen 2 cartridges on the Game Boy can communicate with each other, and Gen 1 and Gen 2 copies on the Virtual Console can communicate with each other on the 3DS. But there's also another problem. Gen 6 and Gen 7 can't communicate to each other and transfer Pokemon without Pokémon Bank either. So we have Gens 1 and 2 separated, Gens 3, 4, and 5 separated within that group, and then Gen 6 is in a group by itself, and then Gen 7 is in a group by itself, and then Pokémon Home is segmented off Gens 8 and onwards. And, just like in Gens 1 and 2, our Pokemon are stuck on older hardware. Even if we make new adventures and new save files, it doesn't change the fact that they're on an old system. And I've had a couple ideas of my own, trying to think of how the Pokemon Company could fix this. I thought probably the better option to do would be allowing the Nintendo Switch 2, or whatever it's going to be called, to do a pseudo download play and communicate with a DS or a 3DS and engage in a sort of mini game or just a flat transfer of Pokemon from box 1 or any box that you want, sort of like how between Gen 4 and Gen 5 you would use DS download play and switch between the games to get the Pokemon. Now, I'm not knowledgeable at all on how the download play system works, but just from the couple Google searches that I pulled up, it seems that it just communicates with another system through a certain wavelength. So you could add like a certain setting on like a Pokemon cartridge or the Switch 2 itself that allows transferring data between those wavelengths. Even if they did loop it in with a new feature on Pokemon Home, that's still the complete fix that we would need, and we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. Sadly, at least from my perspective, this is where we're crossing into optimistic territory. I don't know, I just don't really have faith in Game Freak to add this option to Pokemon Home or anything like that without charging us extra for it or something like that. But I mean, charging extra for it, as long as it's not absurd, it would be like, okay, we would still bite it and go on, but knowing Game Freak and the Pokemon Company's recent track record, I don't see them doing something so generous. There's also a second option I thought of that Game Freak will most definitely also pass up on, because Game Freak and Easy Money aren't really put together in the same sentence anymore, and that would be just re-releasing older Pokemon games on the Switch 2 and future consoles. Now, yes, to be fair, I've mentioned several times in this video alone that Gens 1 and 2 were re-released on the 3DS Virtual Console, So they're not immune to doing it. It's just that that was 3DS era Pokemon, and 3DS era Pokemon and Switch era Pokemon are just two completely different companies. Even getting Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2 on the Switch Online is a very big surprise for me. It was really amazing to see. But of course they had to come with the tagline that Pokemon cannot be transferred into these games because Game Freak said no. And in fact, we know that the Pokemon games can function completely fine within Nintendo Switch Online's emulator. I remember seeing a video a while back whenever Game Boy games were first released, where a hacker didn't do any modifications to the file or Switch Online or whatever. They simply swapped out the ROM file for Kururin and one of the, I think, Gen 3 Pokemon games, and they were completely able to communicate with each other, battle and trade and whatever. The hardware is able to do it, but if they hadn't done it now, then I highly doubt that Game Freak and the Pokemon Company are really keen on putting them on Switch Online or anything related to that hardware. And even if they did, there's no way that they would add Gens 1 through 7 onto the Switch 2. I just don't see that happening. Now, don't get it twisted. I, of all people, would love the most to be wrong stating the statement that I just said. I would be the biggest fan of having Gens 1 through 7 available on the Switch 2 or whatever, even though I would really think that playing the DS and 3DS games on something that has a single screen and configured like the Switch wouldn't be that great, but let's just skip past that. But when I take a step back and think about what Game Freak and the Pokemon Company probably have planned for us, it's just going to be remakes. The remakes, and I guess now Pokemon Legends games, are pretty simple ways for Game Freak to make a lot of money selling a full-priced game and adding those Pokemon back into the available pool of usable Pokemon, which we'll get to in a second. I mean, just thinking about it, I don't even know if BDSP comes up to the same quality as Fire Red and Leaf Green, but I mean, they happened and they sold at least somewhat well, and just re-releasing the old games for $20, even though they would sell 18 times more copies, would just not be a Game Freak move to do. I mean, when they get around to Pokemon Vast White and Deep Black, or Pokemon Let's Go Pichu and Let's Go Meryl, or whatever, for just a checklist purpose, those regions have been added to the currently playable system. That's it. To the higher-ups at the Pokemon Company, a shiny Banette is a shiny Banette. Whether you caught it in Pokemon Ruby or Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, if it even appears in that game, I don't know. And there's more to that statement than you might actually realize upon first glance, because in newer Pokemon games, you transfer an older Pokemon into that game, it will overwrite its moveset and replace it with moves that Game Freak decides that that Pokemon can learn in that game. Say that you had a Salamence in Gen 3, and through level up or breeding it learned Wish. Well, you can have it learn Wish in Gen 3, and then it would work in Gen 4, Gen 5, Gen 6, and Gen 7 with your completely legal Wish Salamence. You decide, oh, well, I might as well transfer it to Pokémon Home and put it into a new game. And it's like, oh wow, Salamence can't use Wish in this game, because Game Freak said it couldn't. And they don't even have to delete Wish from that game to even do this. Like, In this game example, Salamence can't use Wish, but Chansey can use Wish, Alola Mola can use Wish, freaking, I don't know, Teddy Ursa can use Wish, but because Game Freak said, no, Salamence, you don't get to have that move, he doesn't get to have that move. So what's the point of bringing up a Wish Salamence from Gen 3 into a newer game if I'm not going to be able to use Wish Salamence? It's like, you know, if you were going on a trip to Japan with like your old school friends and you were all excited and ready and had your things together, but whenever you landed in Japan, the first cop at the airport walks up to your friend Charlie and he's like, "Hey, welcome to Japan. For the duration of your stay here, we're going to take that shirt off of your body and you will have to walk around with one hand physically stapled to your back at all times. Thank you, welcome, and I hope you enjoy your stay." Like, I understand, that's an extreme example, and kids nowadays would be like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can't use this move. But transferring up older Pokemon is something that people that have been playing Pokemon for a long time are doing. I mean, sure, the kids that started out with Sword and Shield aren't going to know any different, but people that have been playing since well before any of this crap has happened, it's just not the same. I haven't even decided if I'm going to move my Pokemon up from Ultra Sun and Moon to Pokemon Home, because I don't want them sitting in a box for the entire time until a game that I don't like says, hey, you can use this Pokemon, and then it can't use like its Mega Evolution or its really cool moveset that I had because one of its moves is not allowed. Like, me personally, unless they go back to like the Gen 6 style of making 3D Pokemon games, then I'm obviously out of the picture. But the only other way that they could rope me in is if they made like a game that's the love child of Pokemon Battle Revolution and Pokemon Showdown, and you could each have each generation of Pokemon put in, and each gen could have its own like move set starting in like Gen 8 or whenever they started that bullcrap, and then each game before that you can have your Pokemon and do whatever like it's that generation. Because not having the legacy of the older Pokemon and the older moves, just transferring up Pokemon doesn't really hold as much value as it should anymore. Just I miss how Pokemon was back on the 3DS. Heck, I would even take a Gen 7 style game with all the hand-holding in the world if we could just get back to having Pokemon care about its games again. I'm getting a headache for just rambling on for the 2 hours or so that I've been going on in this recording. I don't know. I guess let me know what you think about all of this going on down in the comments below if you care, or if you even made it this far. I mean, if you made it this far, then I really do appreciate it. If you've watched any bit of this video, I appreciate it, because I'm not putting in a great deal of effort when I go through the editing process of it. But yeah, just leave a like, let me know what you think, and I'm going to go lay down and edit. Yay. Bye-bye.